Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone was smiling to your face while quietly working against you behind your back? Manipulators often appear charming, even generous, but behind their carefully rehearsed kindness is a silent calculation. They don't want connection, they want access to your thoughts, your energy, your trust, and eventually your peace of mind. They study your patterns not because they admire you, but because they plan to use them against you. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology had a name for it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The closer someone pretends to be, the more cautious you should become." Evil, as the Stoics saw it, isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's subtle, it flatters, it observes, and it waits. But that doesn't mean you are powerless. In this video, we're not just exposing the tactics of manipulators, we're walking the Stoic path to outsmart them with calm clarity and strategic strength. No yelling. No chaos, just timeless principles that quietly disarm even the most cunning players. So if you've ever felt drained after certain conversations, unsure of someone's intentions, or manipulated into choices that didn't feel like your own, this might be exactly what you need. Let's begin. And if you find yourself thinking, "Finally, someone said it," consider staying with us. There's much more to uncover. 1. Guard your inner fears. There's something about the quiet observer that unsettles a manipulator. When you offer no emotional hooks, no exposed weaknesses, nothing to grab onto, they begin to lose power. And yet, most people, in the name of connection or honesty, hand over the blueprint to their emotional world far too easily. What makes you anxious? What you avoid, what you secretly hope others never find out. But here's the truth. Manipulators do not seek intimacy. They seek advantage. And the more they know about what shakes you, the easier it is for them to control you. The Stoics knew this deeply. Epictetus once said, "It's not things that upset us, but our opinions about things." A manipulator's game is to learn those opinions, especially your fears, and twist them until you doubt yourself. It could be subtle, like a friend who remembers your fear of failure and casually reminds you of it when you're about to take a leap. Are you sure this is your thing? You don't want to end up embarrassed again like last time. The words seem innocent, but their intention is precise, to freeze your momentum with your own fear. Let me share a story. There was a young architect who had just landed his first independent project. He had shared with an older colleague years ago that he always feared disappointing his father, who had never approved of his creative path. When word got out about his new contract, that same colleague cornered him with a knowing smirk and said, "This is big, don't mess it up. I heard your dad's still not impressed." Just like that, all his inner doubts returned, not because of external pressure, but because his fear had been weaponized. That's the trap. Your fears are not just feelings. In the wrong hands, they become tools of control. And when you give those tools away through oversharing or unguarded emotional exposure, you place your mind in someone else's hands. The Stoic does not hide their emotions out of fear, but disciplines them out of strength. They reflect before revealing. They listen more than they speak. They respond, but they do not react. This doesn't mean you must pretend to be emotionless. It means you must be intentional with what you reveal and to whom. Before you speak about your insecurities, ask, will sharing this serve growth or open a door for manipulation? Will this person use it with compassion or with calculation? Many manipulators disguise themselves as trustworthy listeners, only to later pull on the exact threads you exposed. They may use your fear of abandonment to keep you compliant, your fear of being misunderstood to make you over-explain, your fear of conflict to pressure you into silent submission. The disciplined mind watches this with detachment. It doesn't offer every emotion for display. It learns from the storm without broadcasting where the cracks lie. Here's a rule that serves well. If someone has not earned your trust through action, consistency, and respect, they have not earned access to your fears. And how do you develop this discipline? Through daily reflection, through solitude, through the hard practice of observing your thoughts without obeying them. Journaling helps. So does silence. Most of all, self-inquiry. Why do I feel the urge to share this? What am I hoping to gain? Is it strength or approval? Remember, a man who has trained himself to face his fears quietly, with dignity, becomes dangerous to those who thrive on control. Because when your fears no longer govern you, neither can they. When someone tries to guilt you, threaten your peace, or corner you emotionally, and you respond with stillness instead of panic, you become unreadable, untouchable, unshakable. They can no longer predict you. And the moment they can no longer predict you, they can no longer manipulate you. Let's be clear, mastery over fear is not about pretending to be fearless. It's about no longer being ruled by fear. It's about recognizing it, examining it, and deciding with your own judgment whether it deserves your attention. Most fears evaporate under scrutiny. They lose power when faced with reason, and even when fear remains, you can move anyway. That's stoicism in action, to act according to principle, not emotion, to choose the path of strength, even when anxiety whispers otherwise. So when someone tries to unearth your deepest fears with kind questions or quiet curiosity, be kind, but be alert. Be grounded in your self-knowledge, but not exposed. Because as the Stoics taught, the more you master your inner world, the less control the outer world will have over you. In this life, many will seek access to your vulnerabilities. The wise man does not harden himself into stone, but he does build a fortress within. Not to shut people out, but to ensure that only the worthy are let in. The next time someone reaches for your emotions like strings to be pulled, remain steady, offer no panic, no confession, no unnecessary explanation. Let them find nothing to use. That is how you begin to outsmart, not with noise, but with mastery. And when you build that level of inner strength, you'll be ready for the next challenge, understanding how to disarm their tactics before they begin. Let's move there now. 2. Don't surrender your judgment. There's an old saying that truth walks slowly, but lies run marathons. In today's world of rapid impressions and half-heard headlines, this could not be more true. And when it comes to manipulators, those who operate in shadows and trade in illusions, your willingness to believe too quickly becomes their sharpest weapon. If they can make you trust without questioning, they've already won half the battle. Because the manipulator doesn't conquer you with force. They conquer you with belief, the kind you never pause to examine. The Stoics warned us long ago, do not outsource your judgment. Epictetus taught, if someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these. There is power in calm skepticism, in not leaping to defend, agree, or react. It is in that pause, that sacred space between hearing and believing, where your freedom lives. You see, evil people rely on your assumptions. They count on your longing for connection, your desire to trust, your fear of being suspicious or cynical. They play the role well, the understanding friend, the supportive mentor, the charming stranger. Their words are wrapped in sincerity, their stories tailored to your sympathies. But beneath it all, there is often an intent to use, to bend reality in their favor, to rewrite the truth before you even have a chance to question it. Let me tell you about a man named Joel. He worked at a small firm with a team that prided itself on collaboration. A new hire, Marcus, entered the company with charisma and confidence. Within weeks, he seemed to know everything about everyone, who was frustrated, who had doubts, who was hungry for recognition. He began to drop comments to Joel like, "I heard management's not really seeing your potential." "But I see it. They're probably too blind to notice." Joel was flattered. He trusted Marcus, even shared concerns he hadn't voiced to anyone else. Marcus kept feeding him stories about other colleagues supposedly talking behind his back, about how someone else was pitching his ideas as their own. The more Joel believed, the more distant and bitter he became. Until one day he confronted his team, only to realize the rumors were false, the tension fabricated. Marcus, it turned out, had been angling for Joel's role all along. He never needed to make a move. He simply planted seeds and let belief do the work. That's the danger. When you believe without scrutiny, you give others the power to shape your perception of reality. And once your perception is hijacked, your actions follow. The Stoic mind is not one that refuses to believe anything, but one that believes carefully, deliberately. It asks, where is this information coming from? What does this person gain from me thinking this way? Is this fact, or is it assumption clothed as truth? To outsmart manipulators, you must develop a habit of slow belief. Not slow in the sense of delay for delay's sake, but slow in the way a craftsman works with fine materials. You examine, test, and verify before you build upon anything. Because if you build your life, your judgments, or your relationships on what someone else merely says is true, you've surrendered the very thing Stoicism urges you to guard above all, your judgment. Remember, truth doesn't panic. Truth doesn't rush. It doesn't need to shout. But lies come dressed in urgency. They demand action now. They whisper, don't think, just react. That's when you pause. That's when you say, no. Let me observe. Let me ask. Let me find the root. A Stoic lives by reason, not rumor. They question not to offend, but to understand. They doubt not out of paranoia, but out of respect for truth. If someone presents you with information that carries emotional weight about others, about yourself, about your future, your first responsibility is not to feel it, but to filter it. Think about the world we live in. Social media thrives on exaggeration. Headlines are written to provoke, not inform. Even those closest to us sometimes speak from bias, insecurity, or fear rather than clarity. The person who survives, no, thrives, in this kind of world is not the one who knows everything, but the one who is not easily convinced of anything. This discipline is a muscle, and it must be trained. Start small. When someone makes a strong claim, ask calmly, "What makes you say that?" If a story triggers a strong reaction in you, pause and ask, what part of me is reacting and why? If something seems too perfect or too aligned with what you want to hear, consider that it might be designed to do just that. Even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote to himself, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." That's the image you must carry. In a world full of noise, become the one who does not flinch at every sound. Become the one who hears but does not absorb, who listens but chooses wisely what to believe. Here's a final truth. Manipulators are not afraid of your strength. They're afraid of your clarity. They're afraid of the person who asks questions, who doesn't jump to conclusions, who calmly withholds agreement until the evidence is undeniable. That kind of mind is unshakable. That kind of person cannot be pulled by emotional strings. So train yourself to ask the hard questions, not just of others, but of yourself. Am I believing this because it's true or because it's convenient? Am I reacting because I trust the source or because I fear the consequences of questioning it? Every time you resist the urge to believe something just because it feels right, you reclaim power. You shift from being led to becoming the one who chooses. And that, in itself, is a rare kind of freedom. Let others rush into belief. Let them be swayed by flattery, fear, or urgency. You, the Stoic, will stand in reason. And from that still place, you will see the game being played and choose not to play it. Let's now move forward, because once you protect your mind from deception, the next challenge is knowing when silence, not reaction, is your greatest weapon. Let's go there next. 3. Pause before joy betrays you. Happiness is a beautiful feeling, but it is also a vulnerable one, and if you're not careful, your moments of highest joy can become the doorway through which manipulation walks in unannounced. It's easy to believe that the greatest dangers come during crisis, but often it's when we're celebrating that we let our guard down the most. That's when evil people strike, not when you're broken, but when you're distracted by your own delight. The Stoics understood this paradox. They didn't see emotions as enemies, but as powerful forces that must be governed. Seneca once wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart," but he also warned, "No emotion, even joy, should be allowed to overthrow reason." Joy, if unchecked, turns into recklessness. And manipulators, those who quietly observe you, know this better than most. Picture this. A man named Elias finally lands his dream job, a creative director role at a prestigious firm. He's ecstatic, celebrating with friends, family, and colleagues. One day, an old acquaintance shows up, congratulating him with admiration and warmth. "You've made it," the acquaintance says. "And listen, I've got this investment opportunity. I wasn't going to tell anyone, but you're in the perfect position now." Flattered and still glowing from his success, Elias agrees without deep scrutiny. He invests. 6 months later, he learns it was a scam. The acquaintance is gone, and the loss cuts deeper than the money. It shatters his trust in others and in himself. Why did Elias fall for it? Because in his joy, he stopped thinking. He didn't pause. He didn't ask the hard questions. He believed that his recent victory was a sign that everything else must also go his way. And that's exactly how manipulators move. They wait until your logic is asleep, and then they strike. Now think of Olivia, a young woman who just got engaged. She's overjoyed, floating in compliments and admiration from friends and family. Amidst her celebrations, her fiancé's brother pulls her aside with a request. "You know, now that you're part of the family, maybe you can help us out. Just a small loan to cover some wedding costs. It'll stay between us." She hesitates but doesn't want to cause drama. She agrees. Months later, the loan turns into multiple requests. The money isn't returned. And when she finally pushes back, she's painted as selfish and divisive. Again, joy made her compliant. Her happiness clouded her discernment. She mistook flattery for sincerity. She believed that good feelings meant good intentions, and she paid the price. This is why Stoicism teaches us not to avoid emotion, but to never be ruled by it. When you're angry, you might say what you regret. But when you're happy, you might agree to what you'll regret. The danger is equal on both ends of the emotional spectrum. Whether in grief or in triumph, your actions must be governed by principle, not impulse. The disciplined mind celebrates joy inwardly, but acts outwardly with clarity. It takes nothing for granted. It asks, what am I about to commit to? Who benefits from this choice? Would I agree to this if I weren't in such a good mood? These aren't cynical questions, they're wise ones, because not everyone who smiles with you is for you. Some are simply waiting for you to relax your guard. And here's something most people don't realize. Manipulators prefer your happiness over your sadness, because when you're sad, you're more guarded. But when you're happy, you want to believe the best in everyone. You want to share. You want others to feel good too. That's when you're most likely to say yes without thinking. That's when you're most likely to hand over your time, your energy, even your resources, just to keep the joy going. But the Stoic practices a different kind of joy. It's not the fleeting kind that demands others to validate it. It's not the kind that needs applause or agreement. It's the kind that runs deep, steady, and quiet. A joy rooted in virtue, not circumstance. The kind of joy that celebrates the moment, but doesn't surrender its judgment. If you're watching this and you've ever made a choice in a moment of joy that later turned into regret, you're not alone. It happens to the best of us. But you don't have to repeat that mistake. The next time something good happens, a raise, an award, a compliment, a promotion, pause. Breathe. Let the joy pass through you, but don't act until your mind is calm. Here's a small exercise I've used, and maybe it'll help you too. Whenever something exciting happens, I write down the opportunities that come from it. Then, I wait 48 hours before saying yes to any of them. If it's still a good idea after that, if it still makes sense under sober thinking, I proceed. If not, I let it go. This simple rule has protected me more times than I can count. The Stoic understands that timing matters, that clarity often follows stillness, that enthusiasm must be tempered by evaluation, and that true confidence is not shown by saying yes to everything, but by having the strength to say, "Let me think about it." If this resonates with you, drop a comment that says clarity. And if you're someone who's walking this path of growth and self-mastery, consider subscribing. These conversations are meant to support that quiet strength you're building day by day. Because the journey doesn't end with guarding your joy. It continues with learning how to protect your silence, especially when others demand your explanation. Let's move there next. 4. Set limits, not lifelines. There's a subtle but powerful trap that manipulators often use, the trap of indebtedness. They do something for you, something seemingly small but meaningful, and then they wait. They know that most decent people feel compelled to return a favor. It's human nature. Reciprocity is the glue of relationships, and when it's genuine, it creates trust. But when it's weaponized, it creates control. And that's where your self-awareness must step in. Because if you don't know your limits, someone else will decide them for you. Stoic wisdom reminds us that virtue lies not in pleasing others, but in honoring your own reason and boundaries. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In other words, don't act out of pressure or guilt. Act out of alignment. Manipulators, however, thrive on guilt. They make small gestures with a larger agenda. They help you move once and then expect unwavering loyalty. They lend you money and later demand your silence. They buy you coffee and suddenly you're being asked to compromise your values, all under the guise of, "But I helped you." Let's bring this to life with a story. Natalie was a junior analyst at a large firm. Early in her career, her manager Paul took a liking to her. He offered guidance, helped her prepare for her first big client meeting, and even vouched for her in front of the directors. Naturally, Natalie was grateful. She saw Paul as a mentor, someone to look up to. But over time, Paul began asking for favors, covering up minor mistakes, staying late to finish his unfinished work, speaking up on his behalf in meetings where he didn't want to take heat. Each request came with the subtle undertone. "After everything I've done for you, this is the least you could do." Natalie, not wanting to seem ungrateful, kept saying yes. Until one day, she was asked to manipulate numbers in a report. She hesitated, but Paul reminded her, "I gave you your start. Don't forget that." That moment changed everything. She realized the line had not just been crossed, it had been erased. Here's the truth. Gratitude is noble, but when it leads you to compromise your values or your well-being, it becomes self-betrayal. A Stoic doesn't repay kindness with submission, they repay it with integrity. If someone helps you, you thank them. You reciprocate if and when you can, but you do not sacrifice your peace or principles to maintain an illusion of loyalty. Because the minute you allow guilt to govern your actions, you become susceptible to exploitation. Let me give you another example. Kevin was part of a small community initiative. He was deeply involved and known for his reliability. One of the senior organizers, Linda, once helped him find housing when he was between apartments. It was a generous act, and Kevin felt deeply indebted. Months later, Linda began asking him to co-sign documents, take responsibility for events he didn't plan, and even lie to other members to cover her mistakes. When Kevin hesitated, she reminded him of that favor. "Where would you be right now if I hadn't helped you?" she said. Again, guilt was used as leverage, a currency manipulators trade with more than honesty. Kevin had to learn what Stoicism teaches us plainly. We must serve not with compulsion, but with conviction. There is a difference between being kind and being controlled, between being helpful and being used, and knowing your limits is what keeps that line clear. So how do you know your limits? First, recognize the difference between obligation and principle. Are you doing something because you believe it's right, or because you fear what will happen if you say no? If it's the latter, pause. Second, ask yourself, what is this costing me? Not just in time or energy, but in mental clarity, dignity, and self-respect. If saying yes makes you resentful, anxious, or ashamed, it's probably a no that needs to be said. Third, reflect on whether the relationship feels balanced. Do both people give and receive, or does one constantly take while the other quietly withers? Knowing your limits isn't about being selfish. It's about being wise. The Stoics were not passive, they were discerning. They believed in helping others, but never at the expense of their own moral compass. Seneca wrote, "No man can live a happy life if he turns everything to his own purposes. Yet no man can live a fulfilled life if he gives everything away without thought." To put it plainly, you are allowed to say no, even to someone who once helped you, even to someone you care about, even to someone who insists that you owe them. Because what you truly owe to yourself, to your reason, to your peace, is honesty. If you give beyond your limits, you will eventually break. If you serve without boundaries, you will become bitter. And if you're constantly manipulated through guilt, you're not in a relationship, you're in a trap. You don't need to explain your no with elaborate justifications. A quiet, firm, "I can't do that," is enough. And if someone tries to make you feel small for honoring your boundaries, that's their manipulation speaking, not your failure. You are not required to overextend yourself just to keep someone comfortable. Your life is not a debt to be paid off in favors. True generosity comes from freedom, not coercion, and a favor that becomes a chain was never a gift, it was bait. Let your decisions come from clarity, not guilt, from principle, not pressure, from reason, not emotional blackmail. When you know your limits, you don't just protect yourself, you teach others how to engage with you honestly. The next time someone reminds you of what they once did for you as a way to push you beyond your edge, remember this: your value is not measured by how much you give away, but by how well you guard what matters most. And what matters most is coming next. Because once you've learned to protect your time, energy, and choices, the next challenge is understanding the power of strategic silence. Let's explore that in the next part. 5. Protect what you reveal. In a world where everyone is encouraged to be real and open up, it's easy to forget that not all curiosity is born from kindness. Sometimes a question isn't a bridge, it's a trap. And sometimes the person asking isn't trying to understand you. They're trying to map your weaknesses. The Stoics believed in clarity, but they also believed in caution. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This was not just a call for humility, it was a strategy, a way to protect the inner citadel. Because what you say about yourself, especially when you think no harm can come of it, is often exactly what someone with ill intentions needs. Manipulators, unlike the people who care for you, rarely reveal much about themselves. But they will ask, and they will listen, and they will nod and smile and say just enough to keep you talking, not to comfort you, but to collect from you. They are harvesters of vulnerability. The more you say, the more tools they acquire. Your story becomes their leverage. Your honesty becomes your exposure. Let me give you an example. Michael had always been told he was a good listener. He took pride in his openness. At his new job, he quickly bonded with a co-worker named Darren. Darren seemed curious, always asking questions about Michael's past, his relationships, his insecurities, even his fears. Michael, flattered by the attention, shared freely. He talked about his past mistakes, his strained relationship with his brother, and how he sometimes questioned his place in the company. But Darren never said much about himself. Then, during a performance review meeting, Michael was blindsided. His manager brought up concerns that he lacked confidence, that he had unresolved family distractions, and that he wasn't sure he truly belonged in the team. Phrases Michael had used, but only in private. With Darren. He realized too late that his vulnerability had been passed around the office. Not in malice, perhaps, but in strategy. Darren had used Michael's openness to elevate himself, subtly planting concerns while keeping his own record spotless. Here's the truth. Manipulators don't always need to lie to destroy you. They just need you to be unguarded. They don't have to attack you directly. All they have to do is ask the right questions and wait for you to hand them the knife. Now, does this mean you should live in silence, never trust, never speak from the heart? Absolutely not. Stoicism is not about withdrawing from others. It's about knowing when, how, and with whom to share what matters. Vulnerability, when given wisely, is a strength. But when offered carelessly, when poured out to those who never earn your trust, it becomes a liability. Think of it this way. Would you leave your door wide open just because someone smiled at you? Would you show a stranger you're safe just because they asked about it nicely? Of course not. But emotionally, many people do this every day. They mistake curiosity for closeness. They confuse attention with care. A second example. Lena had always been close to her cousin, Rachel. When Lena went through a painful breakup, Rachel was the first person she called. She spoke for hours, crying, venting, sharing intimate details. Rachel listened, but something was off. She never gave advice, never said much about herself. And a week later, Lena's most personal stories began surfacing, not through Rachel, but through the whispers of other relatives. Judgments, accusations, twisted retellings of what she thought was safe. Lena wasn't destroyed by the breakup. She was destroyed by the betrayal. And what did both Michael and Lena have in common? They revealed too much, too quickly, to people who never reciprocated, people who only asked but never answered, people who were not in relationship with them, only in observation. So how do you protect yourself? The Stoic practice offers several timeless answers. First, observe before you speak. If someone is always the one asking but never offering, that's a signal. Real connection is mutual. If the flow of vulnerability always goes one way, you're not in a dialogue, you're in an interrogation. Be mindful. Second, practice the discipline of silence. You don't need to fill every silence with a story. You don't need to explain every wound. Let others earn your trust slowly, not through charm, but through consistency. You're allowed to withhold your story until you're sure it's safe. Third, share, but share with intention. Speak when your words are rooted in purpose, not just to release emotion, but to build understanding. Not just to be heard, but to connect meaningfully. You'll find that when you slow down, the right people will stay and the wrong ones will grow impatient. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But I'd add, it also becomes stained by the company it keeps and the truths it gives away too freely. When you speak to someone, you give them a piece of you. Make sure they know what to do with it. You are not cold for being cautious. You are not rude for being reserved. You are wise for understanding that your inner life is not public property. You are not obligated to share just because someone asks. And if they press harder, if they guilt you, if they make you feel selfish for protecting your space, that is manipulation in its rawest form. You don't have to speak less, you just have to choose better. Your past, your struggles, your victories, they're sacred. Give them to people who honor them, not those who extract them. Some will misunderstand your restraint. Let them. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to walk in clarity. And clarity begins with self-possession. A person who minds how they reveal themselves walks through the world with a quiet kind of power. They are unreadable, not because they're hiding, but because they are whole. And that wholeness cannot be picked apart by simple questions. So if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling lighter, seen and safe, that was probably someone who deserved your truth. But if you've ever walked away feeling exposed, off balance or uneasy, trust that feeling. It's your soul saying that wasn't a safe place. Listen to it. You don't owe the world your vulnerability. You owe yourself your peace, and when you learn to guard it with quiet strength, no mask, no tactic, no manipulator will ever truly reach you. The world can be dark, and navigating it with wisdom takes more than good intentions. It takes clarity, restraint, and the courage to act without losing yourself. If today's message gave you a new lens to see through, feel free to subscribe for more. Your growth is your best defense. And if you're walking this path too, drop a simple comment below. Stay sharp. Let that be your signal, your silent vow to rise above manipulation with calm precision. There's more to uncover, more to strengthen. In the next video, we'll go deeper into mastering your mind and defending your peace without ever becoming what you're trying to escape. Keep going. You're not alone in this.